Brace yourself for this episode of the Acoustic Guitar Build, because we're going to get the top and the back braced in this episode. I'm Jeff, you're watching Home Built Workshop. Welcome to this episode of Home Built Workshop, where we are again working on the second acoustic guitar build. If you guessed by the Go Bar deck set up behind me that we're working on braces in this episode, you'd be correct. In the last episode, I made a radial rosette and we got that installed in this Port Orford cedar top. Now it's time to get the braces applied to this as well as the back. I'm going to begin working on the back plate, which is a set of book-matched ambrosia maple. The first thing we're going to glue on are going to be these back strips, which just kind of helps to reinforce the glue joint. Now, in the first acoustic guitar, I glued these on, then realized I forgot to trace out the outline. So before I glue anything in place, I want to get the outline established using my acrylic template. The strips that we're going to be gluing on are offcuts from the Port Orford cedar top. They're not quite long enough to go the entire distance, so we're going to have to splice in a little piece. Just going to snap a little off there. Since we are going to have to splice this, I just want to clean these joints up at the shooting board. I'm also going to mark out the center line of the back strip so that way I can line it up with the center line of the back plates. After double checking the alignments and my center lines, everything looks really good. I shortened up this piece just a little bit more so it fits within my guitar outline. I think we're ready to apply some glue. I got just a little bit more squeeze out than I would have liked. I got probably a little bit too much glue. It's not going to be a big deal. I'll let that tack up just a little bit after we clamp it in place, and then we can clean that up. The back strip gets clamped in flat, so you'll notice the board that I have underneath the plates. I'm not working in the radius just yet. Everything looks like it's in alignment. Like I said, I got a little too much squeeze out that I'm going to let this glue tack up for 10 minutes or so, maybe 15, and then I'll clean that up really well. And while it's fully drying, I'm just going to spend some time getting the back braces roughly to size. I'm not really going to cover a whole lot of that process because it's kind of tedious and really just a matter of following the dimensions on the plans and shaping the braces accordingly. So I'll meet you back here when this is dry and I've got the braces roughed out. The back strip to me looks like it turned out really well. Now on the first acoustic guitar build, it shifted just a tiny bit off of the center line. Didn't really make any difference, but this one looks like everything is on the center line exactly where it's supposed to be. I've got the braces all prepared for the back, and now we need to cut the recesses into the back strip where these braces are going to sit. After marking out the locations of my back braces, I'm using a small razor saw to cut on my pencil mark. Then using a small chisel, I can remove that material in between my saw cuts. All the braces fit snug. I'm happy with that fit. Now I'll just spend a few minutes with some sanding blocks and round over the edges of the back strip. And while I'm at it, I'll sand the inside of the back plates as well. To pre-radius these braces, I'll use the radius dish as a template and trace the radius onto the brace. Then I'll use a block plane to remove the bulk of the material before sanding it in the dish to get the exact radius on the brace. got these 4 braces all radiused. It's time to glue them into place. I've put down a piece of parchment paper to protect the back from getting scratched up on the sandpaper. I've got my clampy bending sticks ready, some little cauls here that I'll use to help protect the braces. So you can see how if I press down, the back plates kind of conform to that radius, and that's exactly what's going to happen as we clamp these in place. It's going to pull everything into that same 15-foot radius. I guess I don't really need to protect the ends. We're going to be carving that away anyway. I decided to alternate the way these clamping sticks go because it was trying to make the brace tip a little bit. That's sitting in there a lot better now. I think I just had too many on one side and the spring back on the boards was causing it to want to tip back. That's a lot better. So now I'll just repeat that process for the remaining 3 braces. I think I'm going to have to cut some more of these sticks because it seems as though I've broken a few of them and now I don't quite have enough to do all the braces. So I'm going to go ahead and get these things glued in and I'll be back with you shortly. Look at that. It's amazing the difference in tone once you glue it in and it's kind of under tension. Now I get the fun job of basically repeating that exact same process but with a lot more braces for the top. I do have most of the braces for the top roughed out, ready to go. I'm gonna flip this go bar deck around so that I can work in the 28-foot dish, and let's get busy. Again, I'm using my acrylic template to mark out the locations of all the braces. I have small holes drilled at all of the brace locations on the template, so it makes it really quick to mark the locations with a pencil. I'm going to start out with the 2 pieces that are going to become the X braces. I'll just carefully align these, and I need to make some pencil marks on here so that I can cut out a half flap joint so that these interlock together. Now using my razor saw, I'll carefully cut just inside those pencil lines and remove that material. I'll use a file to clean up the edges until I have a nice snug fit. I need to radius these braces too, just like I did on the back braces. I'll trace out the radius and remove the bulk of the material with the hand plane. This time I'm going to try adding some chalk to the bottom so that I can monitor the progress as I sand in the final radius. I'm making sure to change the way I'm holding the piece as I'm sanding so that I avoid putting any extra pressure on any one area. And I'm ready to apply some glue and get these things clamped up. The next piece that I need to glue on is going to be the bridge plate. Now, if you remember when I cut out the piece of material for the back, since this is ambrosia maple, I didn't bother taking a chunk of this just because there's little holes and voids in there, and I didn't want to risk any of those voids weakening the piece. I found a piece of maple that's about the same thickness. I think this will make a good bridge plate. I'm just going to use my acrylic template and mark it out. This piece has a little bit of a void here, some sort of a sap pocket or a bark inclusion, something here that I want to make sure I avoid. I want to take my bridge plate somewhere in this area. Now, if you're wondering why it's crooked, the idea is to kind of have the grain lines running at like a 45-degree angle. That way when you drill your holes for your bridge pins and your strings will go down through, they don't all fall along the same grain line, so that way it kind of helps reduce cracking. Just like for the brace locations, I have holes drilled where the bridge plate needs to go. Makes it really quick to lay out where I need to make my cuts. I'll use my bandsaw to remove the excess material. I'm trying to be very careful in cutting just outside the line. Once I have it all cut out, then it's over to the belt grinder to sand right up to the line. Now I'll spend a few minutes with some sandpaper and round over all the edges, and while I'm at it, I'll sand the whole thing smooth as well. Next up are going to be the two tone bars, but before I can glue these in, I need to do a little bit of initial shaping on the inside edge. Since these butt up against the X braces, it can be a little bit tricky to get in there and shape them after the fact. I'm using some more 3D printed templates to mark out the curve that needs to go on the end of these tone bars. And a few minutes of chiseling, we can remove the excess material. After I glue each piece down, I'm using a scrap of wood that kind of has a pointed tip as a scraper to go around and remove all of the squeeze out. I'm trying to keep the joints as clean as I can throughout this whole process. Now I'm ready to prepare the transverse bar. Before I glue this down, I need to drill a hole through the center of this piece. That's going to be for access to the truss rod adjustment nut. I'm making some marks to indicate the center of the piece. Don't forget to clean up the squeeze out. Well, that's the last of the braces clamped in place. I'm going to give this just a little bit of time to dry, and we can remove it from the bird cage. It does. It looks like a bird cage. We just need like a little parrot in there or something. Voila! The back plate and the top plate are fully braced. Not fully carved, but all the braces are in place. We have the radius on the back as well as on the top. We're making good progress. I need to interrupt you here for a second, because those of you keen-eyed viewers are probably screaming at the screen saying, you made a mistake. And you'd be right. I did. The transverse bar, this one in particular, that I just glued on, was wrong. For some reason, I got my dimensions all mixed up and I cut this too short. This transverse bar is supposed to go the whole width of the top, and it ends up getting tucked into the curving when you attach the top. For some reason, I didn't make this one go all the way. It wasn't until that I was just getting ready to start carving on the braces that I realized that something was wrong. It's fixed. I've got a new one on there. I spent about 2 hours with a heat gun and a little spatula, heating up the spatula and working it into the glue to remove this bar. It was very tedious, but it worked. I only had a little bit of tear out. I spliced in a couple tiny slivers to patch up the tear out, and then made a transverse bar that's the correct size. I don't know what the heck I was thinking, how I ended up making one so much shorter and not catching that along the way, but I'm glad I caught it now and was able to correct it with minimal damage to anything. So now we can keep going with this project. I just wanted to point that little mistake out because, well, these things happen. With that little mistake repaired, I'm now ready to start carving the braces. I'm using my 3D printed templates to mark out where I need to remove the material. Having these little 3D printed templates really made a big difference. It's really quick to mark out where I need to start removing the material, and it helps me keep everything nice and even so that I don't carve them differently somehow. The way I made these was using a PDF of these exact same plans. I just pulled it into Fusion 360, and then I can draw the exact size of the brace right off the plan so that I know the dimensions are going to be correct. And now comes the fun task of carving away the material until I'm down to my line. All these little tiny shavings are just kind of cool to look at, and they smell good too. While this process isn't overly difficult, it is a little bit tedious because I'm trying to be very careful to not slip with the chisel. A slip with the chisel into this soft top could be catastrophic, and I'm really being careful to avoid that. Once I've finished all the carving, I'm using some 3D printed sanding blocks to put a nice radius on the top of all the braces. These were made just like I made the templates to carve the ends of the braces. I used the PDF pattern that I pulled into Fusion, drew these up to match the exact radius I need. They work awesome. That was a ridiculous amount of sanding. After all that sanding, I think we're ready to set both of these pieces aside, at least for now, and move on to the next step. What is that next step going to be? Well, I get to put my side bender to use. It's time to forget about these for a little bit and start working on the sides. Getting the sides bent, making the neck block and the tail block, and getting the kerfing installed. Hopefully, that's going to be in the next episode. I'm really happy to be at this step. It's kind of a relief to have this done. I've done my best to try to tune this as much as possible without really knowing exactly yet what I'm listening for, although I can tell I'm beginning to learn to be able to recognize the differences when I make changes to the braces. I can hear the tone change, and I've been trying to listen to it throughout the process of carving the braces. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss the next episode where we're going to hopefully not break any sides using the new side bender. We'll see you next time.